name is Mark Lavelle, and I served the United States Navy.
My name is Bill Henry. I served in the Army from 1968 to 1970. I was in Custer's O Unit, 1st of the 7th Cavalry Bravo Company.
Well, my motivation came from the place I grew up at. East St. Louis, Illinois was a rough place, no place to grow up. And when I graduated out of high school, hanging around that community was not good for me or anyone actually. So I actually was getting into trouble and going nowhere fast. I needed to get out of that community. So my way to do that was to join the United States Navy.
Well, my motivation was back in 1968, there was a draft going on. And so they were drafting a lot of young men who were, especially ones that weren't going to school or weren't married. And I got an invitation from Southwest Missouri State to set out a semester because my grades weren't very good because I was partying too much and not going to school and missing a lot of classes. So I knew I was going to get drafted, and the Army had a program where you could volunteer for the draft and just serve 2 years. So I volunteered to go in rather than go in the wintertime. I went in the falls, so I wouldn't be at Fort Leonard Wood when it was 10 degrees below zero. So that was my motivation.
Okay, I did not serve in the war personally. I signed up in 1976, which was a year after the Vietnam War. So my time was, I served during peacetime. My father, on the other hand, he served in the World War II in the Army. He was in the front lines. He fought on the front lines, and one of his jobs was to be a runner. And what a runner is was a person who, during radio silence, would run from the front lines to the headquarters to deliver messages, or in times when a radio was damaged. So a lot of times he ran through enemy lines and to headquarters to deliver messages.
Yes, I was in Vietnam. I did a lot of training in the Army. They put me in the infantry. So I went to Fort Leonard Wood for 8 weeks, and then I went out to Fort Ord, California for 12 weeks in advanced infantry training. And then I went to non-commissioned officer school in Fort Benning, Georgia, and I was down there for 12 weeks. And then I went to Fort Lewis, Washington for another 10 weeks, and then got orders to go to Vietnam. And I was in Vietnam for 9 months, and then they sent us over to Cambodia. And when I was in Cambodia, I got shot 3 times going into a bunker complex, and so I got out after that.
The majority of the time, I was stationed in California, Naval Air Station Lemoore, and at the time it was the largest naval air station in the world. But most of my time was spent there unless we were out at sea. I made 2 cruises on aircraft carriers. One was the USS Kitty Hawk. That was a West Pacific cruise that took me over to Japan and Hong Kong and Thailand, Singapore, Philippines, and the list just goes on. And my second cruise was on the USS America in the Mediterranean, and that took me to places like France and Italy and Spain and Egypt and Greece and so on. So I've been halfway around the world, seen a lot of the world aboard ship.
The majority of it was in Vietnam. The other stations where I was in training usually were between 2 and 3 months, and I was scheduled to be in Vietnam 12 months, but like I said, I got shot when we were in Cambodia, so it shortened it a little bit.
After my service, I got into the food and beverage industry. I went to work in restaurants and started at the bottom. I worked my way up. I became general manager of restaurants. I did that for a few years. And once I decided I wanted to move back to Missouri, that's what I did. I loaded up my family and we came back to Missouri. And at that time, I went to work for Forsyth School District as their food service director. I did that for 20 years and I retired from that school district. Now I live in Reed Springs School District and I drive a school bus.
Well, I spent 37 years as human resource manager for Emerson in Ava, so that was the majority of my career. I enjoyed working with people and I got a chance to get into human resources, and that's where I spent my career, and I retired from there 4 years ago.
Well, I met a lot of special people, maybe important people during my time in service, like captains of the ships, admirals of the fleet. I've met a lot of important people. But to me, the most important people I've ever met was the everyday man. The everyday man is the backbone of our country. The everyday man / woman are the people who get up every day and go to work. They make a living for their family. They are big in their communities, and they, to me, run this world. And we can't do it without them.
Well, there's a lot of people you meet when you're in service, and what happens when you get reassigned places, you end up either going with the same people, or you meet people that you knew in some other place before. One of the most special people that I served with while I was in the Army was a gentleman by the name of Bob Frank, and he was from St. Louis. And Bob and I were at Fort Leonard Wood together. We both went to Fort Ord, California. We were in the same company. We both went to Fort Benning, Georgia for non-commissioned officer school. And we both went to Fort Lewis, Washington. And then we both got sent to Vietnam, and we got there at the same time. And we both ended up getting assigned to the 1st Cavalry. Bob went to Bravo Company's 1st to the 2nd to the 8th, and I went to Bravo Company 1st to the 7th. But we did see each other a couple of times while we were in Vietnam. And then about probably a year after I got out, my mom and dad built a log home, and it was Boyne Falls log home from Wisconsin. And when they were getting ready to receive their logs to put their house together, they got a call from a guy in St. Louis, and he said he was a sales rep and he was representing Boyne Falls. He would be coming down to make sure they got all the material. And he said, by the way, I served in the Army with a guy from West Plains named Bill Henry, and do you know him? And Dad said, yes, that's my son. And so he said, well, tell him I'm coming down. So I got to see him after I got out of the service, and we got to visit him. So he was the person that I spent the most time with and trained with when I was in the Army. But when I got sent to Vietnam, of course, I was there, didn't know anybody there, and was halfway around the world. And what happened, we fell out each morning for formation, people got assigned to companies, and then had another formation in the evening. So I didn't get assigned to company on the morning assignment, so I was standing there kind of feeling sorry for myself because I was halfway around the world, didn't know anybody, and looked up and here came Bobby Jolliffe from West Plains that I went to school with. So there I was, neither one of us knew the other one was in the service, and we met in Vietnam halfway around the world and got to visit a little bit.
I would like to make a challenge to everyone in the audience, everyone here today. I want to challenge you to be patriotic, okay? Patriotism is something that seems to be suffering these days, the last few years, and we need to get that back. So I challenge each and every one of you to be patriotic. And here is something what my wife and I do. What we do is when we are out in public, maybe at a restaurant, and there's a ball game, football game coming on the TV, and they play the national anthem, we stop what we're doing and we stand up and put our hands on our hearts. And I challenge each one of you to do the same thing. Get people involved. When you do that, ask other people to stand up with you.